Good morning and welcome. This unprecedented mirror survey of public opinions in two of the world's leading powers presents a snapshot of a bilateral relationship that is at a crossroads. And it is our desire to provide as much information as possible so that decision makers, opinion leaders, and all observers are able to assess not only where we are today, but where we're headed. I'm going to walk through a number of the more detailed charts and data that form the basis for Dr. Li's presentation, starting with a look at how overall these two nations and their populations perceive of one another. If you take a look at the chart that's to your far left, we asked populations which of two statements they agreed with more. The United States accepts China's status as a rising power and wants a collaborative relationship, on the one hand, or the United States is trying to prevent China from becoming a great power. Now, given what you've just heard, that there are differing perceptions in these two nations about the futures and what fate has in store, it's no surprise that you see that in the United States, 64% of the population agrees with the statement that the U.S. does accept China's status as a rising power, and only 32% believe that the United States is making efforts to prevent China from attaining that superpower status. Now, in contrast, you see that in China, 32%, only half as many, believe statement A, while a plurality believe statement B, that the United States is making efforts to prevent China from attaining this superpower status, and a large number are uncertain. So this gives you a sense of the differing opinions in these two nations, the dichotomy and the contrast that forms the basis for our theme of hope and fear. Now, what's driving this relationship is trade. That is the single area that is the source of the greatest hope and the greatest fear. If we take a look at the benefits of bilateral trade, this is the chart that is to your right, there is no question that the general public, as well as business leaders, believe that the United States benefits from trade with China. Within the American population, 72% either agrees or strongly agrees that trade is beneficial to the United States, and among business leaders that rises to 83%. So trade is clearly for the United States as well as for China a positive, mutually beneficial relationship. Yet, if you take a look at the areas of concern, and we'll see another set of charts here, I'd like to thank Lauren for her assistance with these charts, you also see that trade ranks highest among the areas of likely conflict for American respondents. Now, when you take a look at the context, it becomes apparent why. Americans see among the top issues loss of American jobs to China, and here it's important to note that 3/4 of all Americans believe there is a causal relationship. They believe that China is responsible for the loss of American jobs, and a majority opposes outsourcing to China, even if it means higher prices for American consumers. In addition, the growing trade deficit is an area of concern, followed by China's human rights situation. So despite the overall high levels of support within the public as well as business leaders for trade with China, there are these areas of grave concern that lie within. Now, in contrast, on the Chinese side, the greatest area of concern is policy with respect to Taiwan, not trade. And there, we asked a number of quite detailed questions, and you see that there is a majority in China that believes that this relationship between China and Taiwan across the straits is evolving toward peaceful resolution, while a minority, just 12% of the general public in China, believes that it is evolving toward military conflict. With respect to American intervention, there are significant differences as well as some changes that are worth highlighting. Members of congressional staffs are much more favorably inclined toward U.S. intervention if there is conflict between China and Taiwan, with 49% just shy of a majority believing that intervention by the United States is appropriate, although that is a modest decline from the last survey. Business and opinion leaders, as well as the general public, are much less favorably inclined, and indeed, if you take a look at just the general public, only 32% of Americans think that the United States should intervene in the event of conflict between China and Taiwan. So these areas of common interest and greatest threat overlap, but there are also distinctions. If you take a look at the other areas of common interest and threat, you see that the United States, the respondents here, believe that China's domestic stability is an area of common interest, as well as energy policy and security in the Asia-Pacific region. In China, in contrast, following trade, the issues where there is an area of interest are energy, the environment, and anti-terrorism. And so here you can see that within the hope, there is the fear, and you can document this and show that there are significant differences in the perceptions of the countries as well as between the different populations of these countries. As we all know, in the past few months, China has been much in the news because of product safety concerns, whether that relates to pet food or other food products, toys that might be sold during the holiday season, and these concerns became prominent during the time period that this survey was being taken. So it's no surprise that these issues are on people's minds and have affected likely the overall opinion. China's image here in the United States is lower by 7 percentage points with the general public as compared to 2005. We believe that some of that is directly attributable to these concerns about Chinese product safety. Let me walk you through this important chart which illustrates the level of concern. More than 2/3 of all Americans expressed reduced confidence now in Chinese goods as a result of these contamination fears. And, interestingly, in China, 44%, a plurality, also express reduced confidence in their own products. So it is not merely in the United States, it's in China as well that these widely publicized global incidents have created some concerns and anxieties. You'll see that there is even greater concern on the part of business leaders here in the United States about the product safety issues, and that business leaders express a distinct set of concerns that extend far beyond just the question of whether the products are safe. To highlight this, and this appears in your report on page 10, American business leaders believe that China will be the key destination for outsourcing of manufacturing jobs. However, Chinese business leaders do not share this opinion. So there is a divergence in the views of how China, as potentially the world's largest market, will adapt and adjust to its role within the global economy. American business leaders are concerned, in addition to the product safety issue, with corruption, poor intellectual property rights protection, and bureaucratic interference. Those obstruct their ability to do business in China and are rated as the worst impediments. Chinese business leaders, in contrast, also mention corruption and bureaucratic interference within their top 3 of issues that affect their ability to do business, but they believe that the single greatest problem is an inadequate legal system in China. A majority of American business leaders, especially those in the high-tech area, refer to the intellectual property rights issue, although in China it apparently does not present a concern, at least among Chinese business leaders. So that's a sense of trade and product safety, the leading issues on people's minds. Let me turn now to another significant issue of global concern, and that's the environment and the challenges we face with global warming. You may know that the United States and China are the world's leading producers of greenhouse gases. So it's appropriate, given the increased attention to these subjects, that we ask some questions specifically oriented to global warming and to the environment. The Chinese are more likely to be worried than Americans, with 92% of opinion leaders and 89% of business leaders expressing at least a fair amount of concern. That contrasts with the United States, where only 40% of the general public and elites express where 40% of the general public and elites express little or no concern about global warming issues. Americans rate both governments as handling these matters poorly, and they rate the Chinese government in particular as having done a bad job on environmental issues. But in China, both the Chinese government and the American government receive positive ratings, and indeed the Chinese perceive the American government as having done a better job on environmental issues. So it's clear that environmental stewardship will remain an area of concern, and again reveals the dichotomy and the contrast between the perceptions of the populations in these two nations.